If this is the first video you're seeing from me, here's what you need to know. I've spent 20 plus years watching multiple people build brands, and I've watched most of them fail. Not because they were talented, because they started in the wrong place. Everything I'm about to say assumes one thing is true. You're tired of branding advice that doesn't work, and you're ready to understand why. In this video, I'm going to show you why most branding fails, not with tactics, with structure, why outside-in branding creates performance and inside-out branding creates sustainability, and why the system you've been following was designed to fail from the beginning. If you skip understanding this, everything else you build will be exhausting, because you'll be building on borrowed identity, and borrowed identity requires constant maintenance. So let's start with why this keeps happening. Imagine you're standing in front of a locked door. Behind that door is everything you wanted. The work you're meant to do, the brand that actually fits, the impact you know you're capable of, and all of the financial rewards that come with it. And someone hands you a key. They say, this is how you get in. This worked for me. This is the framework. So you try the key and it doesn't work. No problem. You try another one, different expert, different strategy, a different promise, but the door's still locked. So you keep going, another key, another system, another way you're told this is supposed to work. And at first you assume that's normal. I mean, learning takes time. Iteration is part of the process, but eventually something shifts. You stop questioning the keys and you start questioning yourself. Why does this work for other people? Why can I follow the same steps and feel stuck? Why does this always feel forced, fake, exhausting? You don't consciously decide you're the problem, but quietly underneath, you start to carry that belief. Maybe I'm not built for this. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm just not cut out the way they are. And every failed attempt becomes evidence. Not that the approach was wrong, but evidence that you are. Here's what's actually happening. You were never failing because you're broken. You were failing because every key you were given was designed for a different lock. Someone else's identity, someone else's strength, someone else's way of operating. And instead of questioning the keys, you've been questioning yourself. The door is real. The outcome you want is real. It exists. The work you're trying to build, that's real. But the key that opens it cannot come from outside because the lock isn't the market. The lock is you and the understanding. And until you understand that, how you actually work, your operating system, no borrowed key will ever fit. Here's the lie. Find your niche. Identify your ideal client. Craft your positioning. Build your authority. Start with the market. Then fit yourself into it. That's the advice. That's the system. That's what everyone teaches. Here's what the approach creates. Content that performs well, but it drains you. Clients who pay well, but exhaust you. Authority in a space that doesn't actually reflect who you are. And now you're stuck. Because walking away feels like failure, but staying feels like a slow death. So this is the cost of starting with the market. You end up successful, yes, and miserable because you optimized for market fit, not identity fit. This itself is fraudulent, but before I show you why, I need to show you what branding was actually supposed to be. Let's go back to the beginning. The word brand, where does it come from? Cattle. Ranchers branded their cattle, burned a mark into the hide, not for decoration, but for identification. This one's mine. This one came from my ranch. This one you can trust. Because back then, if you knew a rancher produced quality cattle, you wanted to know which ones were his. The brand wasn't marketing, it was a promise. This mark means something. This mark means I stand behind it. This mark means you know what you're getting. That was what branding was, a mark of origin, a mark of quality, a mark that said this came from somewhere specific, and that somewhere matters. And then it evolved. Companies started branding products, not with literal burns, but with names and logos and colors and packaging. Same function, but a different application. The soap came from Ivory, and the car came from Ford, and the computer came from Apple. The brand told you where it came from, and where it came from told you what to expect. Over time, brands became synonymous with something. Volvo meant safety, and Nike meant performance, and Tiffany meant luxury. You didn't have to explain, you didn't have to convince people. The name carried the meaning. The brand did the work. That's the point of a brand, to become synonymous with something, to create instant recognition, to build affinity before you ever say a word. When people see you, they know what they're getting. When people hear your name, they feel something. When people encounter your work, they recognize it as yours. That's not vanity. That's function. A brand that doesn't do that isn't a brand. It's just noise. Let's be clear about what a brand is supposed to do. Brand creates affinity, not just awareness, not just recognition, but affinity. And affinity means people feel connected to you and feel a certain way about you in a positive sense before they ever met you. They see your content and think, this person gets it. They encounter your work and feel, this is for me. They hear your name and already trust what you are going to say. That's not manipulation, that's resonance. And resonance happens when something in you matches something in them. Your perspective mirrors their unspoken thoughts. Your approach reflects their values. Your presence feels like recognition. That can't be manufactured. It can't be strategized into existence. That can only happen when you're actually showing something real. A brand built on market research might get attention, it might get clicks, and might even get sales, but it won't create affinity because there's nothing real to resonate with it. It's a mirror reflecting what people said they wanted, not a window into something true. And people can feel the difference. They might not be able to name it. They might not consciously know why one person feels authentic and another feels hollow, but they feel it. And they make decisions based off of that feeling. Here's why I'm talking about this now. We're living in a moment where everyone has the same tools. AI can write you website copy and create and generate your social posts and create your logos and build your entire online presence in an afternoon. And it will look fine, professional and polished, but generic. We are drowning in AI slop. Everyone's content sounds the same. Everyone's website looks the same. Everyone's messaging hits the same beats because everyone's using the same prompts, the same templates, the same tools. And here's the problem. If your brand can be replicated by anyone with a ChatGPT subscription, you don't have a brand. You have a template with your name on it. The barrier to entry has collapsed. Anyone can look professional now. Anyone can sound credible. Anyone can produce content at scale, which means looking professional isn't enough anymore. Sounding credible isn't enough. Producing content isn't enough. The only thing that cuts through is being irreplaceably you. Not a better version of generic, not a polished version of what everyone else is doing. Something that could only come from you. Something AI can't replicate. Something that carries your specific fingerprint. That's not a nice to have anymore. Because if you're building a brand that's indistinguishable from what anyone else could build, you're competing on price, you're competing on volume, you're competing on what and who can hustle harder. And that race has no winners, only survivors. Here's what you've been told about building personal brands. Step 1, figure out who your audience is. Step 2, find out what they want. Step 3, position yourself to give it to them. And that sounds logical. So you research the market, you study the competition, you find the gaps, you craft messaging that fills those gaps. You build a website, pick the colors, write a bio that sounds like everyone else's bio, and then you post. And it feels off, not wrong exactly, just hollow, like you're wearing someone else's clothing. And here's what they tell you when it feels hollow. You just need better positioning. You need to niche down. You need more confidence. You need to be more consistent. No, you don't. What you need is to understand why you started in the wrong place. Most branding is built outside in. They start with the market. What do they want? What are they buying? What's trending? What's the opportunity? Then they work backwards to you. Find the version of yourself that fits the opportunity. And that is the lie, because that version of you doesn't exist. It's a construction, a projection, a performance you have to maintain. And performances, they are exhausting. Not because you're doing them wrong, but because they're draining by design. You're using energy every time you show up as the constructed version. Energy to remember what that version would say, energy to filter out what that version wouldn't say, energy to maintain consistency with something that isn't actually you. That's not a branding problem, that's an identity problem. You built from the outside in, and now you're trapped in a container you don't fit inside. Here's the other thing nobody tells you. What people want changes. Markets shift, trends move. What's hot today is irrelevant tomorrow. If your brand is built on chasing what people want, you have to keep chasing. Every time the market moves, you move. Every time preferences shift, you shift. Every time a new trend emerges, you pivot. That's not a brand, that's a reaction. You're not leading, you're following, and followers don't command premium. Followers burn out. Followers eventually get left behind when they can't pivot fast enough. But when you build from the inside out, from what's actually true about you, that doesn't change. Your identity is stable ground. The market can shift around you and it won't matter. Trends can come and go and you'll still be standing in the same place, still offering the same thing, still attracting the people who need what only you have. That's not just more authentic, that's more sustainable. That's architecture, not decoration. You're building something that can weather the shifts because it's not dependent on the shifts. It's dependent on you, and you are the one thing that stays constant. Let me tell you what branding is at another degree. It's not marketing. Marketing is what you say to people. It's not content. Content is what you create. It's not positioning. Positioning is where you stand relative to others. Branding is identity under pressure. It's how you show up when people are watching. It's what you do when the stakes are real. It's the patterns that emerge when you stop controlling the narrative. Branding is revealed, not invented. You don't build a brand, you excavate one. The problem isn't that you haven't found your brand yet. The problem is you've been burying it under layers of what you think people want to see. The brand is already there. You just can't see it because you've been told to look elsewhere, everywhere else that it actually lives. Let me tell you what I've watched happen over and over. Someone builds a brand based on market research. They find a gap, they feel it, they get traction, they get clients, they get successful. And then they come to me, not because they're failing, because they're succeeding and they hate it and they want something different. They've built something people wanted, but they didn't build something they wanted. They're serving clients they don't like. They're doing work that drains them. They're making money that feels tainted somehow. That cost is identity. They outsource who they are to what the market wanted, and now they're trapped in their own success. I've seen this destroy people, not their businesses, their sense of self. When your external success is built on internal misalignment, the success makes the misalignment worse, not better, but worse, because now you have something to lose. And that something is attached to a version of you that you never wanted to be in the first place. Maybe you haven't built a brand yet. Maybe you're at the beginning, looking at everyone else online, wondering how to stand out, wondering where to even start. And everywhere you look, someone's telling you to find your niche, pick your audience, study the market, model what's already working. That advice isn't wrong exactly. It's just incomplete. Because if you start there, if you start by looking at what everyone else is doing, you're already one step behind. You're building in response to the market, not an expression of yourself. And the market is crowded. The market is loud. The market is full of people who all started the same way you're being told to start, which is why they all sound the same, which is why they all blend together, which is why none of them stand out. Here's your advantage. You haven't built yet, which means you haven't built wrong yet. You have the chance to do this right from the beginning, to start from the inside, to build from what's actually true about you. Before you layer on the strategy, before you optimize for the algorithm, before you twist yourself into a shape that the market supposedly wants, most people have to deconstruct a brand they already built, take it apart, figure out what's real and what's performance, and then rebuild from that foundation. You get to skip that, but only if you start in the right place. Here's something people get wrong. They think authenticity means transparency, showing everything, hide nothing, be vulnerable all the time. That's not authenticity. That's performance in the other direction. Authenticity isn't about showing everything. It's about not pretending to be something you're not. You don't have to share your trauma to be authentic. You don't have to post your failures. You don't have to turn your life into content. You just have to stop lying about who you are, which is harder than it sounds because most of the lying isn't conscious, it's habitual. You've been doing it for so long you didn't even notice anymore. The way you adjust your voice in meetings, the way you soften your opinions online, the way you round off the edges of your personality to fit the room. That's not strategy, that's survival. And survival mode is not sustainable, not as a brand, not as a business, not as a person. Here's another distinction that matters. Identity is not personality. Personality is how you show up in the moment. It's context dependent. You're different in a funeral than you are at a party. You're different with your kids than you are with your boss. You're different on a podcast than you are in a journal. That's normal. That's not fakeness. That's appropriate adaptation. Identity is what stays consistent underneath all of that. It's the pattern that runs through you, every version of you. The thing that's true, whether you're tired or energized, whether you're succeeding or failing, whether anyone's watching or not. Your personality is what you do. Your identity is who you are. And most people build their brands around personality, which means their brand shifts with their mood, with the situation. Their content is inconsistent because they are inconsistent. They feel scattered because they're expressing what they feel without understanding what drives what they feel. That's not a discipline problem. That's a depth problem. You haven't gone deep enough to find what's actually stable. And until you do, everything you build will feel unstable because it is. After 20 plus years of watching this, here's the pattern. Someone successful with a track record, with real skills, with actual value to offer, can't articulate what makes them different. They've been told to find their unique value proposition. So they look at the market, they look at competitors, they try to find a gap, but they can't. Because when you look at it externally, everyone looks the same skills, same services, same outcomes, same language, same education, same school. So they conclude, maybe I'm not different. Maybe I'm just like everyone else. Here's what's actually happening. They're looking for a differentiation in the wrong place. You're not different because of what you do. You're different because of how and why you do it. And that lives on the inside, not the outside. You've been told to look at the market to find yourself. That's like looking in a mirror to see your organs. The mirror only shows the surface. The identity is underneath. Let me tell you why traditional branding fails for most people. Traditional branding was designed for companies, not people. When you're building a company brand, you're creating something separate from any individual. The brand exists independent of the people who work there. That's intentional. That's by design. But when you're building a personal brand, you're building something that's supposed to represent you. And the tools don't translate. Company branding asks, what does the market need? And personal branding should ask, what does this person actually have to offer? Company branding asks, how do we position against competitors? And personal branding should ask, how does this person naturally show up? Companies ask, what messaging will convert? And personal, what truth does this person carry? When you use corporate branding tools on a human being, you get a corporate sounding human. And nobody trusts a corporate sounding human because they shouldn't. It's not real. It's manufactured. I'm going to tell you something that might be uncomfortable. If your brand feels fake, it's because your brand is fake. Not because you're a bad person, not because you're trying to deceive anyone, because you started in the wrong place. You started with the market. You started with what people want. You started with positioning and messaging and conversion. And somewhere along the way, you forgot to start with you. Or worse, you started with you and then you abandoned you when the market research told you something different. That's not what people are buying. That's not a niche that converts. You need to be more like what's already working. And so you adjust it. I get it. You trimmed, you modified, you optimized until what you were selling had almost nothing to do with who you actually are. Here's the good news. You don't have to burn everything down. You don't have to start over completely. You don't have to throw away what you've built. You just have to understand what you were built from. Right now, you might be building a business, creating content, serving clients, getting results, but you're doing it without a foundation. You're making decisions without a reference point. You're saying yes to things without knowing why they feel wrong. You're saying no to things without knowing why they feel right. You're operating on instinct without understanding where the instinct comes from. That's not sustainable. At some point, the instincts contradict each other. At some point, you get confused. At some point, you lose your way, not because you lack discipline, because you lacked a map. For any of what I teach to work, certain things need to be true. First, you have to believe that you have something unique to offer, not different tactics, not a better framework. Something unique inside of you, a pattern, a way of seeing, a way of being. If you don't believe that, none of this will help you. Second, you have to be willing to look at yourself honestly, not the version you've been performing, not the version you wish you were, the version that actually shows up when no one's watching, when you're tired, when you're frustrated, when you forget to be strategic. That's where the brand lives. Third, you have to accept that this is work, not surface level work, but the really deep work, the kind of work most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. Looking at yourself clearly, it is uncomfortable. Seeing your patterns is uncomfortable. Understanding why you do what you do is uncomfortable, but it's the only way to build something that lasts. So here's where we are. You've probably been building from the outside in. Most people have. You've been told to find your market, find your niche, find your positioning, find your message. And then you've been trying to fit yourself into whatever shape that research created. That's why it feels fake. That's why it's exhausting. That's why you keep second guessing everything, because you're not actually in it. You're performing it. The question isn't how do I build a better brand? The question is, what do I actually build from? What's actually true about me? What patterns run through everything I do? What would remain if I stopped trying to be marketable? When you answer those questions honestly, branding becomes easy. Not because you figured out a trick, because you stop trying to lie to yourself. The brand isn't something you create, it's something you uncover, something you reveal, something you finally stop hiding. That's what we're going to build towards, not a better strategy, a truer foundation. Because when you build from the inside out, the outside takes care of itself. So, what do you build from? That's next. If you want to dig a little deeper into the insides of where this comes from, what are the inner patterns and the identifications, I have a service called BNA72.com where you can explore foundational archetypes that help you to reflect on those core principles of who you are so that you can build a brand that's reflective of you. Thank you so much for attending, and I will see you in the second part of this brand new masterclass.